So it's really been messed up, but we need a bit of return to the marketplace. And a major medical policy, along with these medical savings accounts, would help a whole lot in going in that direction. But the way we're going now, costs are going to go up, quality is going to go down, and then there's already starting to be rationing. You know, they'll say, well, you know, in Canada they have rationing of care. People have to wait 6, 8, 10 weeks for, you know, an MRI. So they come down here, anybody can afford to come down here, you get one the next day or two. I was told that in Canada you can get an MRI for your dog the next day, but if you're a patient, you know, you have to get it for free. But if it's for free, you just have to wait 3 months for it. The market is good, even for delivering services such as medicine, and we've given up on that too easily. For some reason, people think that it's special, and therefore you have to have the government handing it to us. But the more important a service is or a product is, the more important that we have the market. Just think about what has happened in these last couple of decades. Technology has just been fantastic, and in spite of all our problems, our technology is still pretty good. So just think of how much of advantages our businesses and our personal lives have improved with technology. We have cell phones and computers and everything else. And generally, technology, if you take a business, technology lowers costs and makes us more efficient. But in medicine, it hasn't done it because there's too much government management. In one place where the government is not involved at all is producing this technology, such as computers and TVs and cell phones. Can you imagine what it would have been like if we had decided, you know, 20 years ago that it was a good idea for everybody to have a cell phone, and that it would be good to have our kids have them, and we keep track of our kids and all the wonderful things. But the government had to be the planner. So we're going to have the government pick the cell phone company and tell them what to make and distribute it. You know what would have happened. The cost would have skyrocketed. The quality would have crashed in, and everybody would have been unhappy. And just look at what we get now, because that's one area where the market still works. But when you get into education and medicine, housing, just recently the government was way too much involved, and they just messed it up. The one job the federal government should have, and they should never mess it up, and that is protecting your liberties and protecting your properties, and that's about the most they should be doing. Amen.
To your thoughts on the abolishing the TSA and what sort of...
The TSA?
Yes, sir.
You know, I remember so far back when we didn't even have a TSA. But even before the TSA, we had too much government. We had too much government because government assumed the role, probably in the 50s or so, that they were going to provide the security and check us at the airports and have the computers, and then they set some rules because there had been some hijacking. So the rules were nobody should have a gun, not even the pilots should have a gun, and there should never be resistance. You should do what the hijackers tell us. So those were the conditions, and lo and behold, a few people who wanted to do us harm understood those rules. And 19 people with razor blades did what they did to us, and I think it was actually mismanaged. On our part, I think what we have to have is a better understanding of private property rights and the Second Amendment. And we could be taken care of much better. Now, if that were the case, and think about the armored trucks that haul our money from the banks and around to the stores. You know, they have guards, they have a truck, and most people leave them alone, you know. But the airlines assumed the government would take care of us, so they weren't worried about tight cockpits, and they weren't worried about guns, and they didn't have the responsibility. I live in an area where there are a lot of chemical plants. Dow Chemicals next door to us. They have fences, and they have guards, and they have private police, and you know, they provide a lot of safety for us. So I think we got into trouble even before 9/11. But the argument right after 9/11 wasn't so much that we needed to improve things, which I agree, we did need to improve things, but the only argument went on, should we have the government hire private companies, or should we just have the government agents, do it? And one to me seemed like socialism, the other seemed like fascism, where they hired the companies. But it's the company that provides and takes care of the property and the people. They should be responsible. So you'd have to have a better understanding of private property and those responsibilities. But under those conditions, I fly a lot on Continental Airlines. But if Continental then is responsible for my safety, they also should know who's getting on and off their airplanes. So their requirements to me would be voluntary. If I want to fly on their airplanes and they want to check me out before I get on and have special passes and special lines, they could work that out. But when the government does it, remember the other night in the debates, the big argument about profiling? Oh, well, now we've messed it up. So now we have to profile, so we have to be suspicious. Oh, you look like you could be a Muslim, and you look like you could be a foreigner, so we have to profile you. But my point in that debate was, yeah, but just think, another person that committed an attack on us was Tennessee McVeigh, which means we all have to be profiled. We all have to go through it. It doesn't solve the problem. But there is technology available today. Let's say an instrument like your cell phone. Let's say this cell phone is registered with the airline, but this only can be activated with my fingerprint. So I activate my phone or whatever the instrument is, and they didn't do that. All of a sudden, I'm going to get special services because they know exactly who I am. And that I'm not giving up any of my civil liberties. But when the government comes in and does this, that is a different story, and that's what they're moving toward, and, profilings and retinal scans and fingerprints and record keeping and all the rest. So we do not need to ever give up any of our freedoms to be safer. I just don't believe that. We can both have our freedom and our safety. But perfect safety is unachievable, and when government is supposed to deliver our safety, it certainly is unachievable. I would try.
Hello, Mr. Paul. My name is Sam Manuel, and I have a question. We want to get rid of all these government agencies and, drastically change things. And through the years, a lot of people, either good or bad, come to, they need these jobs, and it is an industry in itself, or big bureaucracy, and it does support a lot of people, a lot of jobs, and it's part of the economy. So for you to change that, how do you transition such a drastic change? What do you do with all these people in the meantime?
You're talking about government employees in Washington, D.C., the Department of Education.
Yeah.
Well, in the military, we don't need as many people in the military, but I bring them home, let them spend their money at home, which would be an economic boon, but there would be attrition with all these organizations, but some would be laid off. But, if you have a free market and you bring people out of government, and they do productive work, it's a help to the economy. It doesn't hurt the economy. And the one example that you can think about and not be fearful of having people coming out of the government and go into the marketplace, if you have a healthy economy. It was after World War II. In World War II, finally we had liquidated the debt from the Depression, and things had gotten better financially. So when the war ended, 10 million people came home. And the Keynesians, the economic theorists that gave us the Depression and prolonged the Depression, they said, oh, it's horrible, we got to have jobs programs, we got to do this and this and this, spend more money and make sure there's a transition. But they didn't pass it. A boom started, we got rid of the Depression, and we didn't have to figure out where these jobs are going because there was economic prosperity again. But some of the type could be through attrition. Some of those programs we really don't need it. I think they should go back to productive work. The sooner the better. Where are we going? Over here?
How you doing? As a combat vet, I'm going to school for the GI Bill and, plan on getting a job here. Can you hear me okay?
That's a little better, go ahead.
All right, well, as it stands right now, the unemployment rate for veterans is several points higher than the national average, and I am in favor of your stance on bringing our troops home, closing some of these bases that we don't need. And I guess it's kind of a follow-up to that, where I think the veterans of the military should be held to a higher standard as far as finding unemployment after they come home. What's your your thought process on the short-term goal of doing that?
You know, once again, I have a great deal of sympathy for your suggestion. If you look at my voting record for 30 years, off and on in those 30 years, I voted for very, very few appropriations or authorizations because I just worried about what was coming, but I always voted for veterans benefits, you know. Whether or not you should have sort of like an affirmative action program for people coming home or not raises some question. I'm very sympathetic to that, and maybe something short term, but really what it could do is put pressure on a businessman to pick and choose, and he might not want to pick and choose. I like really freedom of choice in making these decisions. And I don't think we'd have that problem if we had the conditions improved, like our conditions are much worse today than they were after World War II. Finally, we had corrected so many mistakes, and there was a lot of needs, and there were plenty of jobs. I'd much prefer that to be worked out, voluntarily. What I think should be done, and there is some of this, but it's just so overwhelming, and that is job training to make sure that they're capable. Even today, there are jobs going begging because they're not trained. We don't have the training to do some of these jobs, so some business people are actually looking for foreign workers that are better trained, so we could help in that area. But that is a major problem. But when you think about how many people that are coming back that are having medical problems and mental problems, and just think of the many amputees that come back, it just tears my heart out to see that happening. And you think, well, there's only 40,000 of the wounded, but 40,000 times 10, because they probably affect 10 people and their family and everybody's involved. I mean, that in itself is going to be such a requirement. A great deal of sympathy and effort, training I would work for, but I'd be careful in saying that a businessman, if you have two people come in, you must, hire A instead of B. I think that would be going just a little too far.
One more question, and we know people are going to want to talk a little bit to the congressman before you leave.
Here we go.
Congressman Paul, this mill is empty because the products that were made here and the jobs related have left. First they went out, then they went overseas. I hear you talking about productive work. I want to see productive work. What can we do to have productive work developed here, where we have so many of the jobs that have been done in the past into the computer industry, in production, shipped overseas. What's the incentive?
Well, it isn't just here. That is a national problem. I can address it a little bit better in some other states, but some of the things I'm going to say may apply to this state. But where it's been worst has been in the Rust Belt. I was raised in Pittsburgh, and I saw what happened to the steel industry. And, of course, Ohio and Michigan. I lived in Michigan. Some of my medical training was in Detroit. I saw what happened to the auto industry. And usually what happens is we become less competitive. And it's a mixed bag because we become less competitive, and if the consumers, that is us, if they can buy something at 50% off, should we deny their right to buy something 50% off, by buying an import? Especially if the reason we're not competitive anymore had to do with bad government policies. And for the most part, that is the case. There are times when There is just no way that we can produce what somebody else can produce and compete. But what we can do is prevent the problems that make us less competitive. Over-taxation, over-regulation, wages that are artificially high. I don't know if that was a problem here about wages, but boy, I know that was the trouble in the steel mills. That was what brought our railroads down to bankruptcy. Does anybody remember the term feather bedding on railroads? You know, feather bedding. They kept the guys shoveling coal, and there was no coal anymore. You know, that's being non-productive, and our railroads, you know, were turned over to the government. You know, our passenger train. But in the industrial states, the other industrial states, you take Michigan and other places. Boy, they loved it. You know, the power of the union and organization, they could get wages up to, you know, with all your benefits, $70 an hour. Boy, that was wonderful. Yeah, except if you don't have a job, it's not so wonderful. You know, and they moved south. There was a little bit better environment in the south. There was right-to-work state, less taxes. Matter of fact, in my district in Texas right now, Caterpillar just went to Texas and built a plant. And we have 300 or 400 employees in Texas. But we don't have a corporate income tax. We have a right-to-work state, and we were able to keep that plant from going overseas. But the federal government has a responsibility. The monetary system has something to do with it because we are the reserve currency in the world. We literally get to print the gold. So our biggest export right now is paper money. So if we can print the money and sort of pass it out through our banks and all, it looks like a better deal. You can buy stuff overseas and we didn't have to work for this money. So it messes up the economy and the trade, especially it looks like an advantage to us, but it really is a disadvantage because they keep taking our money. And guess what? Our jobs went overseas, but we owe $3 trillion now. So you have to deal with the monetary policy, the tax policy, the regulatory policy, labor policy, and then there would still be some people, there would be some industries that we might not be able to compete in because there's always shifting back and forth. But in a free market, you don't protect labor and you don't protect business and profits. You protect the consumer because we're all consumers. So we want to be able to buy the goods that at the best price and the best quality, like I was talking about cell phones. That is what we want. And I don't even know who makes cell phones. You know, they're made, all pieces are made in this country and that country and whatever. So it's the competition in sound currencies and less regulation and labor law changes. I don't think for a minute that people like you and others who want a job, we can't be competitive. But it's really tough when government policies and bad economic understanding makes it so difficult for us. That's why I'm sticking with the free market economy and individual liberty in our Constitution. Thank you.
Give me your attention for a moment. I tell you, the turnout is just tremendous. We were in Portsmouth last night. We had a huge turnout down there. We come up with Laconia. Folks are coming out. We appreciate you coming out. And those that are standing, thank you so much. What we would like to do, normally we run into a situation where people would like to say hello to the congressman and possibly get a photo. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the photos. Because of the number of people, we're just going to do photos. The congressman is going to be back here by the Christmas tree. We'll do the photos. We'll do all the photos. And what you can do is go on to Flickr. There's a Ron Paul 2012 Flickr account, and you can pull down those photos. So those folks that would like to get pictures with us, if we could kind of go this way and then move back by the tree and then go toward the door. The folks